The restaurant hummed with quiet wealth and calculated smiles. The chandeliers spilled golden light across polished mahogany tables, and every sound seemed softened by money. The air carried the scent of seared meat-red wine, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing nothing in the world could touch you. Elias Grant sat at the center of all the kind of man whose presence made air bend around him. His suit was tailored to silence, and his eyes held the easy boredom of someone who had seen everything and cared for nothing. He scrolled through his phone as a group of investors laughed too loudly at his every word. He spoke with the sharp certainty of a man who had forgotten what it meant to be questioned. Automation will save this country, he said, smiling. Without warm people just need to adapt. I did it. Why can't they? His voice carried the weight of practiced arrogance. Each word fell like glass on the white tablecloth. Tiana Brooks balanced a tray of wine glasses, her steps careful, precise. Her uniform was crisp, but her eyes betrayed fatigue. The day had been long, double shift, no breaks, rent due, and her mother's hospital bills waiting like ghosts in unopened envelopes. She set the glasses down in front of the men, her fingers brushing the cool rim of crystal, and she caught fragments of their conversation. Elias leaned back, dismissive. Hard work. That's what separates success from failure. Some people just prefer excuses, not effort. He waved his hand toward the window, overlooking the city, where lights blinked like coins. You can build an empire out of nothing if you have vision. Tiana kept her expression neutral, her voice steady, when she asked if they would like to see the dessert menu, but her chest tightened with anger. She had met men like him all her life, men who measured worth in digits and dismissed kindness as weakness. She turned away, but his voice followed like a bad song. Sweetheart, the wine's not cold enough, he said, snapping his fingers. She froze just for a heartbeat, then nodded. Yes, sir, I'll fix that right away. Her tone was even, but her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the bottle. The manager caught her eye from across the room, a silent warning to keep calm. Elias liked this place, and no one risked upsetting him, not even for dignity. Tiana swallowed the burn in her throat and smiled the way people do when they have no other choice. At another table, a couple whispered admiringly. Is that Elias Grant from G-Tech, the billionaire who bought out 2 companies last year? He's brilliant. They say ruthless, but brilliant. Ruthless was the right word, Tiana thought, watching him laugh with the investors. His teeth flashed like polished steel. There was something in his posture, something practiced, like he'd been rehearsing power his entire life. Then she saw a glint of gold on his hand, an engraved ring with a crest, 2 lions. Beneath a crown, her breath caught for a moment. She had seen that crest before, tucked inside her mother's old photo album, a blurred picture of a younger Elias, standing beside her mother, smiling. That same hollow smile. She almost dropped the bottle. Her heart stuttered in her chest. A memory rose, uninvited, her mother's tired voice, saying, some men never stay no matter how much you hope they will. Tiana shook it off, focusing on the job, the customers, the rhythm of survival. When she returned with the chilled wine, Elias barely looked up. His eyes slid over her face like she was invisible, and yet something in his gaze paused, lingered just long enough for confusion to flicker there. He didn't recognize her, but she felt the ghost of recognition haunt the moment. Dinner dragged on, laughter, louder, wine heavier. The investors toasted to mergers and layoffs, celebrating profit born of other people's losses. Tiana moved around them like a shadow, silent, invisible, until the steak arrived, the centerpiece of his meal, rare like his patience, and served with ceremony. She set before him with quiet precision a folded napkin beneath the plate. Thank you, he muttered, not looking up. She nodded and walked away, feeling her pulse in her throat. Elias cut into the steak, the knife gliding through red, center perfect, exactly as he liked. Then he noticed the edge of the napkin stained with sauce. He frowned, unfolding it, expecting a bill or kitchen note. Instead, he found handwriting, small, deliberate, slightly smudged. His jaw tightened as he read. You might not remember my mother, but you left her with something you can't buy back. Me. For a moment, the noise of the restaurant faded, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the hum of the city, all dissolved into silence. His hand froze the fork, hovering above the plate. He read the words again, his heart beat a slow, hard drum. He looked up, scanning the room. Tiana stood near the counter, her face calm, unreadable. Their eyes met, and in that instant something cold slid through him. Recognition, disbelief, guilt, all the things he buried years ago stirred awake. He remembered a summer internship decades back, a woman named Marla Brooks, bright smile, soft laugh. His stomach turned. He had promised her the world, then vanished when responsibility came knocking. Impossible, he whispered under his breath. His hand trembled slightly. He folded the note, quickly sliding it into his pocket, as if hiding it could erase it, but the words burned to the fabric like fire. The investors kept talking, oblivious to the earthquake in his chest. Elias nodded absently to their jokes, but the food tasted like dust. The ring on his finger felt heavier than ever's reflection in the wine glass looked older, suddenly smaller. Across the room, Tiana wiped down a table, her movements steady, controlled, but her mind replayed the image of his shock the moment he realized truth had found him at last. She didn't need to say another word. The note had done its job. Elias stood abruptly, dropping his napkin. The manager hurried over. "Sir, is everything all right?" Elias only muttered, "I've lost my appetite." He threw a handful of bills on the table, far more than the meal cost, and walked out without another glance. Outside, the city roared with life, but inside him there was only silence. The past had finally caught up, and it had a name: Tiana. She watched from the window as he disappeared into the night, her face expressionless, but her eyes heavy with something between anger and sorrow. She whispered to herself, "You remember now, don't you?" The restaurant door swung shut, and the soft jazz resumed as if nothing had happened, but for both of them the world had shifted, and neither yet knew how far the tremor would reach. The night pressed against the windows of Elias Grant's penthouse like a mirror, showing everything he did not want to see. He poured another drink, the amber liquid trembling in the glass, as if it too feared him. A note lay on the table, unfolded, stained with sauce and accusation. He read again, and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. "You might not remember my mother, but you left her with something you can't buy back." He whispered the line, until it became a curse against himself. He wanted to believe it was a scam, a trick, an attempt to squeeze money from his name, but the handwriting, the phrasing, the resemblance of that waitress, it all gnawed at a certainty. He called Stephen his lawyer, the only man who still told him unpleasant truths. Stephen's voice came through the speaker, calm, clinical. "Don't engage, Elias. These things happen all the time. People see your face on magazine covers. They invent stories. You pay them to disappear." Elias stared out the window at the glittering skyline. "People disappear easily," he said, his tone flat. His own reflection flickered back at him, pale, tired, older than he cared to admit. Down in the small apartment across town, Tiana sat in silence. Her uniform lay folded on the chair, still smelling of grilled meat and spilled wine or suspension. Email blinked on her phone. Unprofessional conduct. Pending investigation. Her job gone for one note. But she felt no regret. She looked at her mother's photo resting by the window, Marla Brooks, smiling in a borrowed dress sunlight. On her face, Tiana traced the outline of her mother's cheek with one finger, whispering, "He saw me, Mama. He saw you." Morning came, gray and unwelcoming. Elias arrived at his office earlier than usual. The glass walls reflected nothing, but his own unease. His assistant greeted him carefully. As if sensing the storm, he dismissed it with a wave and shut the door. He could not focus on contracts or profit graphs. The note burned in his pocket like a live ember. He opened a locked drawer, pulling out an old file, a relic from a past life. Inside were photos from the early years of G-Tech company retreats, conferences, and faces he barely remembered. Then he saw her, Marla, bright eyes, fierce ambition, the intern who challenged him in every meeting. She had believed in him before he believed in himself. He had promised her success. Then when she came to him trembling with news of a child, he had offered her money. Instead of love, she refused and vanished. He thought it was overburied beneath time and achievement. Elias felt the weight of every year collapse on him. He tried to rationalize. She made her choices. I made mine. But guilt had its own language, and it spoke fluently in silence. He reached the phone again. "Steve, I want to find someone. Her name is Tiana Brooks. She worked at Le Chain Steakhouse." He hesitated. "My daughter." Maybe the word cracked in his throat. Tiana, meanwhile, counted the last bills in her wallet: rent, overdue electricity, notice pinned to the wall, her mother's medical debts still unpaid. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught behind her teeth. Instead, she grabbed her coat and went out into the cold morning. The streets buzzed with people chasing things she no longer believed in. She stopped by the library computer, logged into a terminal, and searched Elias Grant, every headline, every scandal, every glossy photo. She saw a man worshipped for his brilliance, but never punished for his cruelty. That afternoon, Elias walked into the steakhouse unannounced. The staff stiffened. Whispers rippled to the room. The manager approached nervously. "Sir, we didn't expect—" He come off. "Where is she?" "Tiana Brooks." The manager swallowed. "She suspended per your complaint." Elias froze. "Complaint? I didn't file one." The manager blinked, confused. "It came through our corporate contact." He turned without a word, anger rising not at the manager but at himself, at the machine of his own making. He drove through the rain to the address Stephen and found a narrow brick building with flickering lights. He climbed the stairs and knocked the door open slightly. Tiana stood there, her expression unreadable. "What do you want?" Elias said quietly. "I didn't mean for you to lose your job." She crossed her arms. Maybe next time think before you destroy people's lives. Her voice steady, but sharp like broken glass. He took a breath. I didn't know about you or your mother, she laughed bitterly. You want to know that's the difference. You erased her. And now you want forgiveness. He tried to speak, but words failed. So he reached the thing. He always understood money. I can help, he said. I can fix this. She stepped closer, eyes burning. You can't fix abandonment with a check. The hallway light buzzed overhead, casting them in uneven shadow. For the first time, Elias had no reply. She closed the door, gently to sound final and soft. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the peeling paint, breathing the unfamiliar air of consequence. Later that night, a video appeared online, filmed by a customer who had been at the steakhouse earlier. It showed Elias's voice calm and cold, saying everyone has a price. A few seconds, clipped from some forgotten conversation. But now, stripped of context, it spread like wildfire. Hashtags erupted his name, trending alongside words like arrogance, privilege, exploitation. Tiana watched the clip from her phone, sitting on her narrow bed. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who said everyone had a price was finally learning what it cost to ignore a conscience. She didn't smile, but a strange quiet settled inside her, not satisfaction, exactly, but closure in motion. Elias sat in his penthouse again, surrounded by silence and screens filled with headlines. The empire he built trembled under the weight of scandal. Investors called, reporters circled, and for the first time, he felt something close to fear, not of losing money, but of losing control. A note still lay on his desk, its edges curled from handling. He touched it, lightly whispering, Marla, I should have stayed. Outside, the storm thickened, thunder rolling across the skyline, as if the city itself passed judgment. He poured another drink, but it no longer steadied him. He thought of Tiana's eyes, the same eyes as Marla's, accusing. And alive somewhere beneath his regret, a new fear grew, not of exposure, but a truth. He finally understood that the past never stays buried, it only waits. The phone vibrated again, another alert, another headline. He turned it face down, closed his eyes, and whispered into the empty room, What have I done? The rain answered with a soft, steady rhythm, as if counting down to something inevitable. Morning broke heavy and gray, as if the sky itself shared his shame. Elias Grant sat before the television, watching his empire unravel in real-time. News anchors spoke his name with the cold precision of vultures circling the viral video, had devoured everything the headlines screamed about. Hypocrisy and greed. His board had called an emergency meeting demanding his resignation. He stared at the reflection in the dark screen after. Turning off a face lined with power and failure, he whispered to know. One, I built everything to forget what I destroyed. Down in the heart of the city, Tiana walked through the noise of traffic and flashing cameras. Reporters followed, asking questions about the billionaire and the note that started it all. She ignored them, her focus steady. Her manager had called that morning, saying she could return to work if she wanted. The restaurant wanted publicity. The world wanted her story, but she wanted peace. She slipped inside to the back door, the familiar smell of seared meat greeting her like a bitter memory. Elias drove without direction through streets that seemed smaller now. Each billboard, each office tower felt like a monument to something hollow. He thought of Marla, the way she used to laugh without fear. He thought of Tiana, her voice steady, her refusal to take his money. He parked outside the restaurant again and sat for a long moment before getting out. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the scent of it. He entered quietly, heads turning, whispers rising like smoke. He asked for her. Softly, Tiana emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands. Her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat neither spoke. He looked tired, stripped of arrogance. She crossed her arms. What do you want now? He swallowed. I want to say I'm sorry and mean it. I didn't come to fix anything. I came because I can't hide from what I've done anymore. She studied him for a long second, searching his face. A man who had mocked her days ago. He wasn't there anymore, only a hollow version. She said quietly, you can't change the past, Elias, but you can choose what kind of man you want to be next. He nodded, his voice rough. I don't know how to start. She reached into her apron, pulled out an envelope sealed, and warned, this belonged to my mother. She said she wanted you to have it, but she never got the chance. He hesitated, then took it, hands trembling. He unfolded the paper slowly. The handwriting was familiar, looping, gentle, the words blurred as his eyes filled. You once told me people like me were replaceable. I hope one day you learn that hearts don't come with price tags. He closed his eyes. A sound escaped him, half sob, half broken laugh. The note slipped from his hands to the floor. He whispered, Marla, I'm sorry. So many times it became a prayer. When he looked up again, Tiana was still watching him, not with anger, but with something deeper, quiet sorrow mixed with strength. She said softly, you can't undo pain, but you can honor truth. That's all that's left. He straightened his shoulders for the first time, not in pride, but in acceptance. He said, I'll step down. I'll give back What I can I'll make sure your mother's name is remembered. She nodded. That's not for me, that's for you. She turned back to her work, leaving him standing in the silence of consequence. The next day, the world watched Elias Grant walk onto a stage before cameras and reporters. His voice carried none of the arrogance it once had. I am resigning effective immediately. He said, I built a company on power and forgot compassion. I was wrong. He announced a foundation in Marla Brooks's name, scholarships for women in technology, medical aid for families. In debt, the audience shifted uncertain between shock and awe for the first time. Elias spoke as a man, not a symbol. Later that week, Tiana sat in the quiet of the nearly empty restaurant, wiping down tables, when a delivery arrived, a plaque of polished brass, engraved with simple words, the Marla Brooks Scholarship Fund. She ran her fingers over the letters, her chest tightening not with bitterness, but something like release. That night, Elias returned alone to the restaurant. He took the same seat, the same table, where the note had stopped him cold. The waiter approached silently, but he waved him away. No order tonight. He said, just memories. He looked at the chair across from him, the one Marla used to fill his dreams. He whispered to the air, I did what I could. I hope it's enough. Tiana watched from across the room. Unseen, her anger had cooled into a strange compassion. She understood something now. The note had not destroyed him. It had revealed him. She stepped outside into the soft night air, feeling lighter than she had in years. The city moved around her, alive, unbothered. She smiled faintly. Inside, Elias sat alone, the note from Marla and the one from Tiana folded together beside his untouched glass. He raised it once in a silent toast to the ones who never had a price. He murmured, then he set it down, his gaze distant, the sound of quiet jazz filling the space around him. For a long moment, nothing moved, and the camera of the world panned away from him toward the door, toward the woman who had turned pain into truth, her story already echoing beyond walls and headlines. She had not sought revenge, only recognition, and in that she found justice. Outside, the lights of the city glimmered like coins scattered in water, each one reflecting a choice of loss or redemption. Elias closed his eyes and listened to the heartbeat of the world, steady, certain, real. The stake grew cold. But he did not mind. He whispered the last line to himself, a truth. He finally understood. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers, and it's written on a napkin.